Most people have a story about this. A dog that wouldn't leave a sick person's side. A cat that sat vigil for days. An animal that seemed to know something was wrong before anyone else in the room did. For a long time, scientists dismissed these stories. Animals don't understand death. They don't grieve. They react to absence, not to loss. There's nothing happening behind those eyes that resembles what we feel. That view has now been so thoroughly dismantled that there is an entire scientific field dedicated to studying exactly this question. It's called comparative thanatology. It's one of the newest disciplines in animal behavior research, and what it's finding is genuinely one of the stranger things I've come across. The formal study of how non-human animals respond to death and dying barely existed as a discipline until the 2000s. For most of the 20th century, the dominant scientific view was that animals simply didn't understand death. As recently as 1932, a prominent primatologist named Solly Zuckerman wrote that monkeys and apes do not recognize death, for they react to their companions as if the latter were alive but passive. That was the consensus. They don't get it. They just notice an absence. But Charles Darwin had already asked the better question, nearly a century earlier. Who can say what cows feel when they surround and stare intently on a dying or dead companion? Darwin didn't answer it. It took another 150 years for science to try. What researchers have found, across species, across continents, across the span from the smallest creature you can imagine to some of the largest, is that something is happening. Something measurable. Something that, in at least some cases, looks a great deal like what we feel. We're going to go from the smallest possible animal to the largest. And what we find at both ends of that scale is genuinely surprising. Let's start here. If you think death awareness requires a complex brain, consider the fruit fly. The common vinegar fly, Drosophila melanogaster, is about 3 millimeters long. Its brain contains roughly 100,000 neurons. For comparison, a human brain has about 86 billion. Research published in peer-reviewed journals found that fruit flies have depth perception. When a fruit fly is exposed to a dead companion, it responds through both visual and olfactory cues, and that response is not trivial. Here's what makes this genuinely strange. When a fruit fly perceives a dead companion, it activates serotonergic signaling, serotonin, the same neurochemical pathway that's involved in human depression and grief. The effect isn't just behavioral, it's physiological. Fruit flies that were exposed to dead companions lived shorter lives than those that weren't. The grief response, if we can call it that, shortened their lifespan. And here's the part that stops me. The negative effects were reversed by pharmacologically blocking serotonin signaling, the same general approach used to treat depression in humans. A fruit fly sees a dead companion. Its serotonin system responds. It lives less long. And antidepressant equivalent chemistry reverses the damage. We share our grief chemistry with an insect that lives for 30 days and has a brain the size of a poppy seed. Let that sit for a second. In 2007, a paper was published in the New England Journal of Medicine about a cat, not a metaphor, an actual cat, a gray and white shorthair named Oscar, who lived at the Steerhouse Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Providence, Rhode Island. Oscar had been adopted as a kitten by the staff. He grew up on the dementia ward. He was, by all accounts, not a particularly affectionate cat. He didn't seek attention. He wasn't the kind of animal that curled up with just anyone. But the staff noticed something. Oscar had a pattern. He would walk through the ward, past room after room, past patient after patient, ignoring almost everyone. Then, without any obvious trigger, he would settle beside a specific patient, curl up, stay there. Hours later, that patient would die. Not once. Not as a coincidence. With a documented, published pattern that the New England Journal of Medicine found sufficiently rigorous to put into print. At the time of publication, Oscar had 25 confirmed predictions. The count later exceeded 100. What is he detecting? The leading scientific explanation doesn't involve psychic ability or mysterious intuition. It involves chemistry. As cells begin to die, they release specific chemical compounds. Ketones, oleic acid derivatives, compounds associated with organ shutdown that are produced in measurable quantities as the body begins its final processes. A human cannot smell these compounds. We simply don't have the hardware. A cat has 200 million olfactory receptors. Humans have 5 million. Oscar was not sitting vigil out of compassion. He was detecting the chemistry of dying, hours before any medical monitor registered anything unusual. The staff eventually began calling family members when Oscar settled beside a patient. He was more reliable than the equipment. In the summer of 2018, a southern resident orca, known to researchers as J35 and to the public as Tahlequah, gave birth to a calf off the coast of British Columbia. The calf died within an hour. Tahlequah didn't let go. For 17 days and 1,600 kilometers, she pushed her dead calf through the water, balancing it on her head, nudging it with her rostrum, diving down to retrieve it when it slipped below the surface, refusing for more than 2 weeks to release it. Her pod members helped. Other orcas took turns supporting the body. Shared grief expressed as shared labor, a behavior with no clear survival function, no evolutionary explanation, no interpretation other than what it looks like. Scientists called it a tour of grief. The world watched. In late December 2024, Tahlequah gave birth again. Days later, the calf died. She did it again. Same behavior, same refusal, for at least 11 days. The same mother, the same loss, 6 years apart. I want to be precise about what this means, because the word instinct gets used to dismiss this kind of thing. Instincts are fixed action patterns. They run the same program in response to the same trigger. They don't have memory. They don't carry the weight of a previous loss. What you're looking at with Tahlequah is an animal that grieved once, carried that experience for 6 years, and when the same loss arrived again, grieved again, with the same specific behavior, the same refusal to let go. That is not a program running. That is something that looks, from the outside, like it remembered. In early 2024, researchers studying Asian elephants in the tea plantations of northern Bengal, India, documented something that had never been scientifically confirmed in Asian elephants before. 5 elephant calves, found buried, not lying where they fell, not abandoned, buried, in irrigation ditches, positioned with their legs above the ground and pointed skyward, soil padded flat around them. Camera traps caught images of elephants carrying calves across the plantation, by trunk, by leg, in the dark, moving them, placing them. Villagers reported hearing loud trumpeting during the nights. Nobody witnessed the burials directly. When researchers performed autopsies on the calves, they found that all 5 had died of natural causes. They were not carried into the ditches accidentally. The ditches were not deep enough for a calf to fall in and die. They were placed there, deliberately. And then, the herds avoided the paths where the burials had taken place. For years after, the routes the elephants took through the plantation curved around the burial sites. They buried their dead at night, in private. They mark the places by avoidance. This is 2024 peer-reviewed research published in the Journal of Threatened Taxa. It's not widely covered yet. Most people haven't heard of it. I'm not sure what to do with the image of a herd of elephants moving through darkness, carrying their dead, finding a place to put them, and then never walking that path again. But it's not nothing. Crow funerals are probably the most well-known example of animal death behavior. The gathering of crows around a dead companion, the calling, the mobbing, the eventual dispersal. What most people don't know is what's actually happening in the crow's brain when this occurs. Research published in Behavioral Brain Research showed that the sight of a dead crow activates the part of the crow's brain that is equivalent to the human prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the region of the human brain associated with complex decision-making, risk assessment, planning, and the integration of past experience with present behavior. It is, in simplified terms, the part of the brain that thinks. When crows gather around a dead companion, that region lights up. Researchers Kaylee Swift and John Marsliff spent years studying crow funeral behavior and found that the gathering isn't primarily mourning in the human emotional sense. It's a collective intelligence session. The dead crow is a data point. The living crows are using it. They examine the body. They identify associated threats. A predator, a dangerous location, a masked human who was nearby when it died. They memorize those threats. They share the information with other crows who weren't there. In experiments, crows that attended a funeral for a bird they'd never even met were still able to identify and avoid the threat associated with that death months later. The dead serve the living. That's a different way to frame what grief is for, and it's not wrong. Here is the part that I find genuinely unsettling. A growing body of research suggests that grief, in animals and in humans, may not have originally evolved as a response to death at all. The reunion theory, developed by researchers at UCLA and Cal State Northridge, proposes this. Grief originally evolved to motivate searching behavior for companions who had gone missing. In an evolutionary context, this makes sense. If a companion disappears, separated by distance, injury, or temporary circumstance, grief drives the surviving animal to search, to keep looking, to not give up on reunion. That search drive, that refusal to accept absence, would have had survival value. It would have helped reunite separated members of a group. It would have kept mothers looking for calves that had wandered. It would have prevented premature abandonment of companions who were still recoverable. The grief we experience when someone actually dies, permanently, irreversibly, may be an evolutionary side effect of this search function. Under this theory, when a mother elephant returns to the bones of her dead calf for years after the death, standing there, touching them with her trunk, she's not mourning in the philosophical sense we understand. She's running an ancient program that was built for reunion, misfiring on a loss it was never designed to process. Grief as a search function. Running on a target that isn't there. Looking for something it will never find. I don't know if that makes grief feel more or less lonely, but it does change what it looks like across species. The fruit fly with a shortened lifespan. The orca balancing her dead calf on her head for 1,600 kilometers. The elephant carrying her young through the dark to a place she'll remember forever. They're all running the same ancient program. And so are we. So, do animals know when another animal is dying? Yes, in ways that range from the chemical detection of a nursing home cat to the 17-day grief tour of a killer whale. In ways that span from a fruit fly serotonin system to an elephant's nocturnal burial ritual. The evidence isn't that animals have human grief. It's something stranger, and in some ways more interesting. Grief appears to be a feature of life itself, built into the biology of creatures across hundreds of millions of years of evolution, expressing differently in each one, but running on the same underlying chemistry. The assumption that it was uniquely ours was wrong. And underneath all of it, there may be this: an ancient search program, written into living things long before complex brains existed, that activates when something is gone. Looking. Still looking. The dumb question had a smarter answer than anyone expected. It usually does. If this one stayed with you, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from. And drop a comment. Do you have a story about an animal that seemed to know? A pet that sat vigil or changed before anyone else noticed? I'm genuinely curious what you've seen.